morning, world. Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon.
Great morning, world. This is your boy Dragon coming at you on the 27th. This is being filmed live on the 27th of this month. It's unbelievable how fast things are going. And it just in observation, you know, it's going to be fun. Our guest today is from South Africa, and obviously that's where my wife is from. So it's exciting for me to be speaking to somebody from there. But what's interesting in observation is, you know, I'm here on the East Coast and I'm seeing, you know, the whole coronavirus thing is just like, it's this interesting thing that just keeps coming back in pulses. And the interesting thing that I'm observing right now, not taking any sides, because for me, I'm open to everything, but I'm noticing, and I don't know if you're noticing this too, but just the whole new influx of people that are getting sick, and unfortunately, some of them are very close friends of mine. Are, you know, it's what's interesting about this whole non-vaccinated thing, which I find just so fascinating, because I don't know exactly what is 100% right. I know what I chose to do, but I don't know what's right. But what I'm seeing in human behavior is that when people get the coronavirus, right, all of a sudden they're like, man, you know, that was stupid. And then they're putting out these posts on social media. They're moving from being like so against it to saying, everybody get it. You know, it's not. And what's fascinating, I was talking to Chicken about this the other day. And one of the things that I just find so fascinating about human beings, I just look out the window, like, you know, in my podcast studio, I have a window I'm looking out and I just see people walking around. And I'm just so fascinated how quickly human beings forget about their immortality and also the impermanence of time. You know, human beings have their core values and all these things that they stand behind, which is a fascinating thing as well. But they go about their lives with this amazing ability to forget that they don't know how long they have, and they stand by things, and they go, you know, and they fight for things as if they have plenty of time. You know, when a human being steps into the urgency of now and takes action now, right, they make different decisions. So I was just having a lot of fascinating observation of that. So one of the things, so the book is in full motion right now. I've got just an amazing team assembling, helping me complete that process. So I'm just in full flow with that. That's going to be awesome. And, you know, entrenched in this concept of the interface response system and everything that I talk about, like, I think the number one piece of feedback that I get from the podcast, people love the fact that I speak the truth and I just unveil these things that everybody kind of knows are important, but we have this, just like the impermanence of life, we have this amazing ability to get rid of them. A big piece of the interface response system is recognizing this programming that we have. And that programming forces us to, you know, perceive things and react to them inefficiently. Very often we fly off the handle, or we label things and create concepts and perceptions. And that very often is the very thing that holds us back from growth, personal growth and success. So anytime I meet someone fascinating, especially from South Africa, that has this, you know, niche where they repurpose a word, I'm so fascinated by that. So I'm going to introduce you to Jennifer Amy Stoller from South Africa. I'm going to bring her out here in just a second. And so naturally, we have a South African connection because of Chicken. But what's really interesting about her, she calls herself the divorce chick. So just me saying that, the divorce chick, just what's your knee-jerk reaction is that this woman's going to come out here and take a stance on divorce and, you know, and who knows what that means? Like, you could be this person that says like divorce is bad, or I would never get divorced, or you could be like, oh yeah, divorce sucks. I don't want to go through that again. So think about your knee-jerk reaction. Take advantage of pausing and just get curious and say, well, I wonder what she is going to talk about, because she's got this amazing background in coaching protocol where she has, like I love, repurposed the word divorce. So I'm going to bring her out here and unmute her. Hello, my friend.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. So we're streaming live, and we never know because it's on multiple channels, most of which we can't see, Facebook, and I think we're even on Instagram right now as well. Which is pretty cool because Instagram typically does not allow us to stream, but now today, of course, they are. And so,
amazing! That's a win.
Are you in Joburg right now?
Yes, I'm in Johannesburg. Okay.
And you can hear her accent. We love that accent. I fell in love with that accent, and I live with that accent.
It's a great accent. It's actually funny. So my accent's a bit strange because I have a little bit of British in it because my mother's from England. So sometimes I'll just throw out words and people are like, where are you from? I'm like, Joburg. And then I also have a little bit of a Jewish twang because I'm also Jewish. So it's a bit of an enigma sometimes for people.
It's funny. What's funny about South Africa, before I knew anybody from South Africa, first of all, I would always get confused between the accent being British or Australian, but also my perception of South Africa is that when you go there and you get off the plane, you have to be careful not to get attacked by a lion and you giraffe walking around, and you don't know that South Africa is like this totally chill place that you could be in and not even know that you're anywhere else. But I think it's so fascinating to learn more about a culture that most people create perceptions, and that's what I'm all about. So let's jump into it. So we've had many conversations. We're becoming friends, and you call yourself the divorce chick. And I know that there's a law background, and then there's a coaching background as well. What I'd love you to do for the listeners right now is just kind of let us know a little bit about your background, how you've come to this place to be passionate and practice what it is that you do, and then we'll get into some conversation.
Of course. So essentially, I was a full-time litigation divorce attorney, right? So for about 6 or 7 years, I was completely committed to the litigation space. I would deal with clients on a daily basis, dealing with the actual divorce, like proper legal divorce. Until at the end of 2019, I was like, this system is very flawed, right? Like, when you're a law student, you're like, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to change law. I'm going to do all these things. And then you start to realize that the law can't change unless the human changes behind it. So then I set out on this journey where I started to see the human behind the law. And instead of seeing, like, let's say, a plaintiff or a defendant or an
let me ask you a question. So did you just say the law can't change unless the human changes?
Yeah. So for me, it's one of those things where I have a concept that I call trustice. So it's basically trust and justice in one word. And so many people scream and shout, I want justice, but they don't trust the people that allow them to get there, right? So they get themselves into a position where I'll give you an example. They'll be married, let's say, for 10 years with someone. They will want a divorce, but they'll act in such a poor manner. They will be vicious. They'll be angry. They will use the kids as ammunition, and then they'll go, oh no, but it's divorce that's bad. I'm like, no, divorce isn't bad. It's actually your actions in divorce. So that's when I started to kind of explore that space. And I actually started a company called Impassion, Transcend Yourself, last year, which was basically about taking the human and transcending the human out of their self-limiting beliefs and all of that. And cut long story short, I just stepped into my power of divorce because I am a divorce attorney, did a coaching course, all of that. And now I help people divorce from humans, habits, and spaces that don't serve them. So like if you have to look at the word divorce, it actually means separate, right? But at the last sentence in the definition is with an undesirable effect. I want to change that. I want to show people that you can divorce from anything in your life, whether it's a human, whether it's your lack of self-love, whether it's a habit, whether it's anything that's not serving you, you get to. So that's kind of changing that narrative on divorce.
So, first of all, while you were talking, I took a sip of water and went down the wrong tube, and I started coughing. Isn't that interesting? I was just thinking about that while you're talking. Like, what's up with that wrong tube? And there's so many analogies right there. It's like, oh, it went down the wrong tube. Sometimes when I hear things, it goes down the wrong tube as well. That's just the way my brain works. So I'm so fascinated with this. First of all, I love the word trust us. Oh my God. I mean, I'm just thinking about, like, that's the first time I've ever heard that, just that, if you want, everybody wants justice, but how many people like earn trust us? I love that. So when I look at the word divorce, what's fascinating, because I want to know what your approach is, because I mean, it's very hard for someone to get past what they've been brought up thinking it means. Very often it's attached with failure, right? And we shame ourselves when we divorce. But then all of a sudden you put a spin on it and you say, well, what else in your life do you need to get divorced from? It could be concepts, it could be, toxic people or whatever. And then all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more comfortable. What I find interesting about using the word divorce, and I'd love you to speak on this a little bit because obviously you're passionate about it. What I find interesting about using the divorce in the context of cutting ties with something that no longer serves you, which is very, very much in my research. The word divorce is not something, it's something that has finality to it. It's like when you get divorced, it's one thing to get separated from something. Now, when I'm teaching people cognitive distancing, for example, I'm teaching them to pause and distance themselves. In essence, that sounds like a little dog.
That's my dog. And honestly, Baloo, can you relax? No one is allowed to walk in this complex. No one is allowed to move in this complex. No one's allowed to do anything without Baloo having a say. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well,
Stop
but you
it.
know what? It'll come in handy one day when somebody's doing something wrong. So the finality of divorce, very different than separation, because what's interesting, if I use the analogy, is if I'm in the process and the throes of getting a divorce, the first stage is separation. Separation doesn't have finality. Now, what's important about separation is that's your time to think and make sure. So you probably meet a lot of people that are in the throes of kind of like contemplating divorcing from something, but they're probably in that purgatory / separation where it could go either way. Is that kind of when you meet people?
So essentially, when I started to change the narrative on divorce is because I actually deal with people going through marital divorce, right? But for me, the legal part is easy, right? When I say the legal part is easy, the law says A, B, and C. This, you just basically apply the law. But what happens is that when you apply A, B, and C to a human that is not willing to divorce from their shame, that is not willing to divorce from like, as human beings, we have all different things that kind of, we either don't think that we're enough, or we think that we're better than others. Like, there's so much. And I know from listening to your podcast and everything that you do, it's very focused on the human and how different we can be. And what I started to realize is that when people are actually divorcing from their marriage, sometimes if they're not doing the healing work and going on the journey of actually divorcing from the space and seeing the good and seeing maybe the bad and all of that, they don't actually get to set themselves free. And what is the point of divorcing in a marital sense if you're just going to live in shame? If you're just going to live in a space where you wake up every day, because I deal with people that are going through, they literally wake up and they're like, Jennifer, today I want to like die. And I'm like, why? And obviously I send them to psychologists and stuff if it's clinical and depression and all of that. But I sometimes say to my clients that actually you're suffering at your own expense, right? Like pain is inevitable, but sometimes suffering is optional. And sometimes we actually suffer unnecessarily. And the problem comes with lawyers, like actual lawyers that only litigate and that only deal with the legal stuff, is that they don't see that like the human may be suffering unnecessarily and tap into that. So when I started to tap into that and I started to see the human and I started to understand that the human can separate, divorce, let go, be happy, my job got a lot easier as an attorney. And I started to see so much change in an accelerated amount of time. And that for me, that's like where it's at. Like so many people say the only person that wins in a divorce is the attorney because they get paid. That was never a win for me. Like a win for me is seeing a human evolve and heal through a process that is actually meant to destroy them.
You know, what I'm realizing now is that, and in the context of Clubhouse, maybe you should take your mute off. See if that works.
There we go.
Just to make sure that people can hear you. They can hear you through my microphone. But so I'm so fascinated with this. And you just said, because I come from, my background is as a doctor, and you can look at the diagnostic nature of medicine very, very similar to that of the law. And the reason, and it's like that ABC concept, the person comes in and we follow the law, or a sequence and a flow. But the problem in both realms, and I used to experience this, is that it doesn't necessarily take into account the human. You know what I mean? So it's so interesting, because I mean we need law and we need rules and stuff for obvious reasons. But when it comes to somebody like going through that healing process, I mean, because from my observation, when somebody gets divorced, like a traditional divorce, marital divorce, it it's very rare. I always think that I think I got the most well executed, healthiest divorce that ever lived. I always tell people, if you ever die and come back to life, you want to be my ex-wife, because we're best friends and I take really good care of her. I mean, it's like a great deal for everybody. But that's not typically what happens, and I think that's because of the confounds and the rules, that somebody's going to get screwed, and somebody, it's very hard to go through the healing when your head is in a lion's mouth, and you're just in survival mode and you're a victim of something. So I love this idea of somebody stepping in and helping people from the humanistic side. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your approach. But then in the context of divorcing other things, once again, the law shows up. Like, let's say I want to divorce myself from toxic people, and some of those toxic people are my family members, right? The law, which is society and how we were programmed and brought up, says that you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to put up with shit from your family no matter what. So what's interesting for me about this conversation and your approach is, it's acknowledging the things that most people don't know they can or should acknowledge. That's, so they're just kind of like receiving the shitstorm that is attached to any sort of a detachment. I mean, think about it. The personal growth world just has so much to do. People are spending so much time and money trying to learn how to let go of stuff. So
Yeah.
what is your approach in helping people go through that healing process and divorce from things, people or things?
So I think actually the divorcing from things, why it's so fascinating is that, because actually when I like, I'll give you a perfect scenario. When I do a divorce with a like a couple that are going through a divorce, you have no idea. Well, I'm sure you do because you've gone through a divorce, but basically, like, I'm not only dealing with the marital stuff, I'm dealing with things that like, I had a client that would tell me 10 years ago her mother-in-law said this to her and she's never let it go. And I'm like, there's just so much there. It's not only like, if you just had to do a divorce from the marriage, that's the easy part. That's the easy part. But when you're dealing with a person that actually likes to hold on to things that hurt them, because sometimes when we hold on to things that hurt us, that's known. It's like we know how to deal with that. We're so comfortable in that pain, but we're so scared to let go of the pain, because what if we try to let go of the pain and happiness doesn't lie there? And um, when it comes to dealing with my divorce clients, when I sit down with them, I say to them, listen, I want you to tell me about you. I want you to tell me what triggers you. I want you to tell me how you feel about certain things. And then I'll take the law and I'll apply it to you. I literally mold the law and the legal process around the individual. Because if you have someone that hates conflict, or has anxiety, or has a fear of speaking up, and you throw them into a litigation space, I'm literally creating a space where they are going to destroy themselves even further. And that's when a lot of people say to me, like, how do you get these skills and how do you do that? I just trust my intuition and I just trust myself. And when I'm speaking to attorneys sometimes, and I'll say to them, like, yeah, but I trusted my intuition, they look at me like I'm crazy, like they're going to like admit me to a ward or something, because that's not normal. Like, as an attorney, you're supposed to be a robot. So my process is very much one, I feel the human, right? Like, I genuinely, the minute that I sit down with someone, I will be able to tell you their energy, like how they're feeling, what they're going through. Many adults that I actually deal with in my divorce practice, they haven't healed from the family traumas that they've gone through. They've had very bad relationships with their parents. They've had very abusive relationships with their fathers. Their fathers might have left them when they were younger. There's so much there. And my aim is to, one, stop that generational pain, where like the pain that they had of their ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors, and they're going into divorce, gets put onto their kids. And then, yeah, I literally just focus on the energy. I focus on the human, and then I take the law and I manipulate it in a way that it serves the human and the kids in it. And I know you said about your divorce, you said, yeah, the way that your divorce done, that's possible. Because if you're getting divorced, it's like when I say to people, if you hated your job and you left your job, would you make your life a living hell leaving your job and like basically doing like creating a path of destruction? Or would you leave your job and go, oh, that's actually a success because I've gone to something better? We think divorce is a failure, which I think is absolute nonsense.
Yeah. And I love the concept is so good, but it's unfortunate that it's not such a reality. I mean, meaning so few people are taking this approach. Like the idea of getting to know the human, and then you use the word manipulating the law, which is not what you're really doing. It's like you're crafting and connecting the law so that it matches their needs and situation. What sucks about the law is when you find out what aspects of it work against you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there's this, whenever somebody falls below the line as a victim in life, it happens as a response to something unfair or unjust. And then what we do is we start to shame ourselves and everything like that. And that's what sucks about the law. That's what sucks about a diagnosis that you hear. You know, you go into a doctor and he tells you, yeah, you're fucked because this is going on. And immediately you go into that victim status. What I find interesting is that, you know, it's like, well, where can we work? Where can we work to actually help somebody heal? Because either way you look at it's happening to you. It's something that's happening against you. But when you can go dig in, like you were talking about generational healing, when you can dig in and say, well, of course you feel like that. Of course that you're feeling like that because what you've experienced in your life, you know? So it's like, I'm just thinking about, I would assume lawyers don't really dig in and find out about somebody's past, right? I mean, like when I'm sitting down with a mediator or a divorce attorney, it's just cut and dry. They're just ABCing it. But I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be cool, like if they knew that my parents got divorced and their parents got divorced, and it didn't go well. And I grew up in a household with no father and things like that. I mean, in a perfect world. So I would assume that this has to be an added service. Is that why you're starting a coaching company as well?
Yeah. So that's essentially for me, and I'll give you a little bit of a story of how I even got here, is that when I was a full-time attorney, I was that person that would say, like, because I'm fascinated what makes humans tick. That fascinates me. I'm fascinated with why people do the things that they do. And generally it's because there's a trigger there, there's a memory, there's a trauma, right? In most of the instances. So I have a client right now where her father left, like her mother was left with nothing, right, when they got divorced, and now she's fighting because she has this fear of lack, that the same thing's going to happen to her. And my job as a lawyer becomes very, very difficult if I don't understand that fear of lack. So now I say to her, you know what happened with your mom and stuff, you actually probably going to manifest that because you attract what you fear most of the time. And like, I now have to kind of change her mindset, and it's worked. Now she's started working again. I said, you can't also sit back and wait for the world to save you. You have to take action.
Let me ask you a question, because what you're saying right now is very sensical.
Mm.
And anybody listening to this would be like, yeah, in a perfect world, all lawyers would do this. Here's an interesting question. I can answer this question, and if say, why don't medical doctors take the time to do this kind of work? And my answer would be they don't get paid for it, and they're so stressed out and overwhelmed by their inability to even do what they're doing. The idea of digging deeper, and then there's also the problem that medical doctors are very, very cautious not to get too emotionally engaged in somebody's life and get that transference and take it home. In the world of law, because look, lawyers get a bad rap, for the most part. I mean, you're a wonderful person, but people try to stay the hell away from lawyers. In fact, in our pregame, you were talking about how lawyers get paid to stimulate conflict. I mean, like, what a messy business proposition to hire someone that is at an advantage the shittier things get. So why is it that more lawyers don't take an approach like that? Is it similar to the reason why medical doctors wouldn't, or physicians?
Let me put it this way. I left my law firm because you can't do both. You can't do both. So as we were talking earlier, I don't want to be an attorney and a coach in this. It's very draining and it's very, very hard. It's extremely difficult. Like, I do it now, and there are days where I wake up and I'm exhausted. Like, and I'm completely honest about it. Like, I'm exhausted. I feel drained. I feel like my energy is being completely drained. But I know now that I can be the buffer between the client and the lawyer. And that's what I do. So when the client is going through a really hard time and the attorney doesn't have time to explain to them, this is how you're feeling and all of that, I get involved because I
It's
also know
almost,
the law.
it's almost like you're a midwife. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's interesting.
basically.
It's like you're no. It's fascinating because I didn't. But until I met you, I didn't know that something like this could exist. Like, somebody that could, like, advocate for me between my reality and the law. Because if I don't have that, I could be just totally screwed, because I don't understand it. I'm in a weak spot because I feel like a victim, like, hey, what the hell's going on? I didn't do anything wrong, and this is happening to me. And then boom, the law comes down and it says, and it's like a stamp, right? So I love the idea of somebody that knows the law, that kind of like is my team member. But is that so when people hire you, because I know that you actually practice law as well, but when people hire you to take that role, how does that work?
So as I said, you know what, I also didn't know that something like this could exist. And it's fascinating because as I went along with it, I started to create it, and it is different. There's nothing like this, especially where I live. But I created a concept called legal easement. And it's basically easing someone through the legal space, right? So let me give you a perfect example. Someone will come to me, they have a legal issue. I say to them, send me all your documents, send me absolutely everything, send me a background, no more than 3 pages. Because I also like when people write, because I also think when they're writing down their trauma, it's a form of healing, right? And I don't want to be sitting with them and them reliving it, getting triggered. And because I'm a massive empath, it also like affects me. So I kind of give them homework before I see them. Then I say to them, this is how much I'm going to charge you for a 2-hour consult. And in those 2 hours, I deal with what they've gone through. I deal with where they are, and I give them a plan of action for the future. And I give them tools. It's basically a little divorce toolbox that they get to take each tool out as it comes. Because my whole vision of my life is that I don't want to sell time. I want to sell results, right? Like if I'm selling time as an attorney, it means that I'm working all the time for money, but not making any change. So when a client comes to me, I play that space. But when I start to see that it's heading in the litigation space, I only work with attorneys that are in the same ethical alignment as I am. And excuse my language, attorneys that give a fuck about people. And I have 2 that I work with. And then what I'll do is that I will hold space with the client. And if they go into the litigation space, I refer them. But I'm like kind of the middle ground between the client and the attorney. So attorneys are very busy. They're not going to reply to your emails all the time. They're not going to answer your phone when you want to speak to them. I do. You call me at 10:30 at night and it's urgent, I'll answer, right? Obviously with
question. Why wouldn't I just have you represent me as my attorney?
Because I don't want to do that anymore. So I am the attorney. So like now I'm good in settlement negotiations, I'm good in mediation, and I'm good in making people think about the actions now that are going to affect the future.
You stay away from litigation is what you do.
Yeah, I was a litigation attorney for 6 to 7 years, and I can't handle it. I started to realize I was a soldier in lawfare, like basically like lawfare. Like I can't litigate anymore. I physically cannot. So I pass it on to someone that when they're in litigation, she'll phone me and she'll be like, Jen, this is what's happening. What are your thoughts? And we bounce ideas off each other. I think out the box. I give her ideas. And I do law very differently. Like I'll phone an attorney and I'll be like, what the hell are you doing? Many attorneys are scared to challenge other attorneys. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And they're like, but the law says this. I'm getting instructions. I'm like, but in practicality, these 2 people are actually not fighting. You're making it worse. So I've now and trust me, many attorneys are starting to tell me how many more years of experience they have, because obviously they're like, I'm more experienced. And I'm like, yeah, but I also see beyond the law. And what you're doing is that you're igniting more conflict, and that is not okay with me. So sometimes people also have to litigate, because I'm also not someone that's going to stand in the way of people's lessons. I think some people, they have to learn their lessons, and those lessons are through their divorce. I hate watching people learn very hurtful lessons, especially that affect their children. But I don't get to play God, right? I don't get to fix their lives. I get to plant a seed, and I tell them every day they've got to water that seed to create a beautiful tree, and we can watch it together. But I don't get to save everything. Does litigation have to happen sometimes? Of course. Because if you're dealing with someone that is not willing to do or even meet in the middle, or even give us a cent, I'll go to court. But I will make sure that when my client goes to court, they're prepared, they're emotionally stronger, they see it as a liberation, not a battle that'll destroy them. It's a long process. And the first thing that I ask my clients to do as I sit down with them is trust me. Because if I don't have their trust, we cannot work together. Because then I have to constantly convince them that I've got their back, and that's just too exhausting for me, to be honest.
Yeah. So this concept, one of my biggest takeaways is this concept, which it appears is what you're doing, is this concept of trustist, build trustist. You know, it's like a whole other profession And, I'm just thinking right now that like, I want to go out and like break the law so I can hire you and just experience that. I mean, it just makes so much sense
Yeah.
to like, no, I don't think, I mean, the scariest part of, and I love the analogy of the medical practice as well, of entering the court of law or entering the, operating table or the exam room is, and this is very, very much about, our programming. We've been programmed to fear it. And a large part about the fear is attached to the unknown. Like we always fear the unknown. And then add to that somebody that like has spent tons and tons of time and money and in their life learning this stuff called the law or medicine. Very intimidating to hear language you don't understand. So like a good lawyer, for instance, would be someone that sits down and just slowly explains and says, here's one scenario, here's another, do you understand, do you want me to explain it? That doesn't happen a lot, but the idea of like sitting there dealing with the law and things like that, but having somebody that knows it as much as them, but is actually on my side and has a vested interest in me, like not only getting what I'm due and getting a positive outcome, but also doing some healing. I mean, it's a great idea. Like I said, I'm very excited to break the law. So trust us, I very much love. So I know that you're starting a new podcast and it's in its infancy, and I think people would love to hear more about this stuff. The Divorce Chick is what it's going to be called. She's got a website that you can go to. Now, this is what websites sound like in South Africa, everybody, but they work just the same. And we'll put it in the show notes of the podcast, but it's www.thedivorcechick.co.za. But you got to hear the way she says ZA. Go ahead.
ZA.
ZA, right? So in America, if you say that, people will write ZEDA.
No, Americans are the best. I even said the other day, I need to check my diary for this one woman that I'm working with. And she's like, what is a diary? I'm like, what do you mean? What is a diary? She's like, oh, you mean a planner? I'm like, no, I mean a diary.
Yeah. So in closing, one thing that I'd love to hear from you is, because I don't want people to anticipate that the doom and gloom behind all of this. It's nice to and refreshing to know that there's a better way. But like I one of my good friends, Tia, who just got married this past weekend, right? Here she is, like the week after she gets married, hearing about divorce. So there's really two portals of entry here, and I want to put an exclamation point on this. Is okay, so there is the traditional concept of divorce and the legal ramifications of it. And she is an advocate for that. And that is just a wonderful, wonderful service. But then there's this other concept that she's using the same philosophy. Another portal of entry is just this concept of divorcing from things. Like you don't have to be married. You don't have to be in a divorce to work with her, right? Am I correct in saying that?
100%, 100%.
So how do people access your information? How do people reach out to you and things like that?
So they can literally go on my website. So if it's obviously the legal stuff is all South African, I have an online course which is called Divorce Sugar Assault, which is actually an 8-week healing process for marital divorce, right? I'm also in the process of writing a book, which is super overwhelming but exciting, right? Like I'm really, really excited. And yeah, podcasts, my Instagram at The Divorce Chick. That's where I share most of my content, YouTube's. I just like making humans know that they can take their pain and turn it into power. And I also like to show humans that sometimes, like, yes, it's scary to leap into the unknown. Yes, the unknown is scary, but trust me, for me, it is more scary knowing that that people are suffering at their own expense unnecessarily. Like, leap into that unknown. Happiness may lie there, joy may lie there, more destruction may lie there. But like people always say, you only live once. I'm like, bullshit. You live every single day. You just die once. Like, and this is the one thing I always say to my clients, like, I've got you. If you need anything, like, set up a call, do something. Because for me, I really do believe that my purpose in this life is to show people that you don't have to suffer. Like, you get to, even if you're laughing and crying and smiling in the destruction, like, every day is a new day. And take your tools, and the healing is in the feeling. It's not weak if you're sad. It's not weak if you're vulnerable. It's actually a strength. And then you also get to help others. That, like, the pain that you feel, you get to also rise with others in that space. So yeah, everything's on my website though. They can find everything there.
I love it. And again, that's www.thedivorcechick.co.za. You know, I just love this concept. And, you know, I love reminding people what's possible. And I just love the repurpose of this word divorce. And I think what we really brought up is, you know, and this concept of you don't have to suffer. I don't think people can avoid suffering because it's a feeling and it's just, we're wired, but it doesn't have to be a negative in your life. You know, it's normal to feel like, I can't imagine anyone would be like, oh, wonderful, I'm getting divorced. You know, I'm excited. You know,
some people are, some people are, but
Well,
not many, not many.
yeah.
But when suffering has meaning, I think it's huge. Like, sorry to interrupt you, but like, there's a quote from Viktor Frankl, who was in the Holocaust, and you know, I'm Jewish, and he basically says, when suffering, oh, there we go. That is so crazy. That is literally like, suffering can have meaning, but we have to go, okay, when are we suffering just because it's comfortable here? Comfortable, if you know what I mean. Right. Like, sometimes we just have to leap into the unknown, and that suffering does have meaning.
Yeah, it's all good. And you know, it's just great to know that there's, you know, what I love about this episode is that it just unlocked something that we didn't know was there. It's just, there's a concept. I would run like hell after this trust us concept, TED Talk, and all that stuff, because the coolest link behind, because you're an attorney, and I was drawing the analogy of medicine, but I think the coolest link behind all of this is, you know, there's rules that society has depicted, and it's happening all over the place. And because of those rules and our acknowledgement and the way we place value on them, that is the birthplace of these icky feelings. There's uncertainty, there's a lack of knowledge, and all that stuff. And we needlessly suffer so much because of that. So the whole concept of knowing that there are people that can advocate for you, which is, it's just like having a personal growth, a life coach of sorts, or in my company, you know, a health coach, is just somebody that's guiding you through a process that they've already been through and that they understand. And it just makes so much sense. And what I think people can take away from this is, if you're stepping into the unknown by yourself, it's going to be very hard to not be worried, and unless you're just one of these people that just says, screw it, I'm going to do it. And there are people like that. But for the most part, people are suffering just because they simply don't know, you know? So I love the whole concept of, you know, forgiving people for they know not what they do. But at the same time, another analogy that's interesting is when there's two people involved in a divorce, if both of them are not equally interested in resolving it, you know, that's where conflicts, that's why we need rules and we need law. But hopefully people can, to the best that they can, acknowledge and avoid that. So thank you so much for being with us. We're going to hopefully, you know, we're actually excited because, you know, we're going to be in Cape Town in December.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. It's going to be awesome.
We're going to have like super awesome dinners and fun stuff at our house. So you got to stop by and meet each other. And thanks so much for being with us. And I'll put all your information. We'll take it out now. Be right back.